It was the middle of my second semester when everything in my life began to change. I had recently joined a new college far from home, and every day felt like a quiet struggle between adjusting and surviving. I was a decent student, reserved, punctual, and careful about following every rule. But even the most disciplined hearts sometimes find themselves pulled towards something unexpected. Our principal, Mr. Ayan, was known across the campus for his calm personality and sincere leadership. He wasn't the kind of man who raised his voice or demanded respect, he earned it naturally. His words carried balance, and his presence gave everyone around him a strange sense of comfort. I had admired him since my first day, not because of authority, but because of the quiet strength he carried in his voice. Every morning, I would see him walking through the corridor with a file in one hand and a gentle smile for every student who greeted him. There was something reassuring about the way he treated everyone equally, firm, yet kind. Over time, I found myself noticing his small gestures, the way he encouraged students who were struggling, how he stayed late to check on maintenance staff, and how he never hesitated to appreciate good work. One afternoon, after class, I stayed behind to submit an assignment. He was in his office, writing something in a large register. The room smelled of books, coffee, and the faint scent of rain through the open window. When I handed him the paper, he looked up and said softly, "You've improved. Keep going like this." Those simple words felt heavier than they should have. Maybe it was because no one had spoken to me with such warmth in a long time. I smiled, thanked him, and left, but that moment stayed with me for days. After that, our conversations became slightly longer. Whenever I crossed paths with him, he would ask about my classes, my hostel life, and whether I was eating properly. It felt natural, caring, and yet, I could sense something deeper growing in those small exchanges. I began to realize how much his presence mattered to me. A few weeks later, I was chosen to help organize a campus event. It meant I had to spend extra hours in the administrative block, often under his supervision. During those quiet evenings, while others left, I noticed how he looked tired but never complained. Once, I asked him why he worked so much. He gave a half smile and said, "When you care about something, you don't notice time passing." That answer made me think, maybe he wasn't just talking about work. Days turned into weeks, and a subtle, unspoken understanding began to form between us. It wasn't wrong, but it wasn't ordinary either. Sometimes I caught him looking at me longer than usual, only to look away quickly. Other times, he would offer advice that sounded more personal than professional. But neither of us said a word beyond what was acceptable. Then one evening, a heavy rainstorm hit the city. Power went out across the hostel block, and the corridors turned completely dark. The sound of thunder echoed, and the wind howled through the trees. I couldn't sleep. Out of my window, I noticed a faint light glowing in the principal's office across the courtyard. For some reason, that small light felt like a signal, a calm spot in the middle of chaos. Maybe he was still working late as usual, or maybe he couldn't sleep either. I told myself I'd just go and check if everything was okay. Nothing more. Putting on my jacket, I stepped into the rain. The campus was silent except for the sound of water hitting the ground. Each step I took felt heavier, not because of the rain, but because of the uncertainty in my heart. When I reached the office door, I saw the light flickering inside. My hand hesitated before knocking. For a moment, I thought of turning back, but something inside me whispered that this night was going to change everything. That I finally raised my hand and knocked gently. The sound of footsteps approached from the other side of the door, and then, the handle turned, the door opened slowly. Mr. Ayan stood there, slightly surprised to see me. The soft glow from the lamp behind him created a calm circle of light in the dark corridor. For a moment, we both said nothing. The only sound was the rain falling outside and the faint hum of thunder in the distance. That he looked at me with mild concern. "You're out in this weather? Is everything all right?" he asked. That I hesitated before answering. "Sir, I noticed your office light was still on. I just thought maybe you needed help, or maybe I just couldn't sleep." He smiled faintly and opened the door wider. "Come in before you get drenched." I stepped inside. The room felt warmer than usual, filled with the smell of tea, books, and rain. A pile of files lay open on the desk, but he gently pushed them aside. He handed me a towel and said, "You shouldn't be walking around at this hour. You'll catch a cold." There was a kindness in his voice that made me feel strangely safe. For a moment, it felt as if the storm outside had disappeared, that we sat in silence as he poured tea for both of us. The sound of the rain on the window made the whole world feel distant, as if only the two of us existed in that small space. After a while, he spoke softly, "You seem worried these days. Is everything fine at the hostel?" I looked down at my cup, unsure what to say. "I don't know, sir. I just feel lost sometimes. Everything feels heavy, expectations, people, future." He nodded slowly, his expression thoughtful. "I understand that feeling. Even adults have moments where we feel alone. We carry responsibilities, but sometimes it feels like no one truly sees us." His words sounded personal. I looked up and saw something different in his eyes, a kind of loneliness I had never noticed before. "I didn't expect you to say that," I said quietly. "Everyone thinks you're the strongest person here." He chuckled softly. "Strength isn't about being unbreakable. It's about hiding the cracks when you have to." There was silence again, but this time it wasn't awkward. It was peaceful, like two souls quietly recognizing something familiar in each other. That we spoke for a long time that night. About dreams, regrets, and the kind of emptiness that success cannot fill. I realized he wasn't just my principal, he was a person who had sacrificed parts of himself for duty, for reputation, for others, and maybe, deep down, that's what connected us. We both understood what it felt like to be lonely while surrounded by people. At one point, I asked, "Sir, do you ever feel like you've missed something important in life?" He looked toward the rain-streaked window and said, "Yes. Many times. But life doesn't always give us chances to go back. It just teaches us to live with the memories of what could have been." His voice trembled slightly, and for the first time, he seemed more human than ever. The clock ticked quietly between us. I don't know what came over me, but I said, "I don't think you've missed everything, sir. Sometimes, meeting one right person at the wrong time can still change everything." He looked at me for a long moment, not as a teacher, not as an authority, but as someone who finally understood. The air between us felt heavy, filled with words we couldn't say. That he finally sighed and said softly, "Some connections are meant to be silent. They exist only to remind us that we're still human." The rain had slowed to a drizzle. He stood up, walked to the window, and opened it slightly. Cool air filled the room. I felt my heartbeat calm, though part of me wished time could stop right there. He turned back, smiled gently, and said, "It's late. You should go and rest." I nodded, standing up slowly. As I reached for the door, I felt something shift inside me, a mix of peace, sadness, and something deeper I couldn't name. When I stepped outside, the campus was quiet again. The storm had passed, but inside me, a new one had just begun. The light from his office still glowed softly behind me. I took one last look before walking away, knowing that night had changed something forever, not in action, but in heart. The next morning, sunlight poured through the hostel windows as if nothing had happened. But inside me, everything felt different. I went about my classes as usual, yet my mind kept returning to that quiet room, the sound of rain, and the words we never said. When I saw Mr. Ayan in the corridor, he greeted everyone with the same calm smile. But when his eyes met mine, there was a brief silence, a flicker of understanding that neither of us could ignore. He looked away quickly, adjusting the file in his hands, and continued walking. That single moment told me everything had changed. Days passed like that. We both carried on as if nothing was unusual, but the distance between us felt carefully built, not out of anger, but out of fear. I respected that distance because I knew it came from wisdom, not coldness. He was protecting both of us from something we could never explain to the world. During lectures, I could sense when his attention shifted my way for a split second. During meetings, his tone softened when he addressed me. It was subtle, yet enough to remind me that our bond was still there, invisible but alive. A few weeks later, rumors began to circle around the campus. Some students whispered that I was getting special treatment. It wasn't true, but rumors rarely need truth to grow. I tried to ignore them, but I noticed how the principal started avoiding public interactions with me even more. One afternoon, I found a small note in the library, folded neatly between the pages of a book I had once borrowed from his office. It wasn't signed, but the handwriting was unmistakable. The note said, "Some lessons in life are not found in books. They are felt once and remembered forever." I held the paper for a long time, unsure whether to feel comforted or broken. That small message carried the weight of everything we couldn't say aloud. Later that week, he called me to his office one last time. His tone was professional when he asked me to sit, but his eyes told a different story. The files on his desk were gone, replaced by a single mug of tea and a half-written letter that he spoke quietly. "I wanted to thank you for helping during the event and for your dedication to your studies. You've done well." I smiled faintly. "Thank you, sir. You've always inspired me." He paused for a moment before continuing, "You're finishing this term soon. After that, you'll have a new journey ahead. Keep your focus there. Don't let anything, or anyone, hold you back." I understood what he meant, though he never said it directly. It wasn't a farewell in words, it was a farewell in intention. He was reminding me to let go with grace. The air between us felt heavy again. I wanted to say something, to thank him for understanding me in ways no one else ever had. But before I could, he smiled gently and said, "Sometimes, the right thing to do is to walk away before feelings become mistakes." That single sentence stayed with me. It wasn't a rejection, it was a lesson, a reminder that love, in its purest form, isn't always about possession. Sometimes it's about knowing when to stop. That I stood up, nodded respectfully, and left the room. Outside, the evening sky glowed with orange light, just like the first day I had joined college. But now, I wasn't the same person. Weeks later, I graduated. During the ceremony, he handed me my certificate. Our hands brushed for a moment, a brief touch that carried months of silence and a lifetime of meaning. He whispered only one word, "Proud." That was the last time we spoke. Years have passed since that night, yet I still remember it clearly, not as a secret, but as a story that taught me something profound. It taught me that real connections don't always end with grand gestures or promises. Sometimes, they end quietly, leaving behind lessons that shape who we become. Whenever it rains, I think of that office light glowing through the darkness, a reminder of a night that changed two lives forever, because some stories are not about what happened after the door opened, they're about what we learned once it closed.